Hello everybody and welcome! Today I would like to show you, because maybe some of you might be interested in how I did it, how I built that Saturn V going to EVE mission. As you've seen here, I've got a lot of Apollo missions in here. Let's start with this one. This is the Making History rocket that I did. Making history, of course, being the expansion of Kerbal Space Program. So this is the lunar module in here, then we have our service module and so on, and of course third stage, second stage, and here first stage with the 5 F1 engines. You may also have noticed that the fuel levels are not completely full in these tanks. The reason being because otherwise these engines would not be capable of carrying the entire rocket into space. So yeah, there's that. So this was basically my template I went from to produce my EVE mission. I also had this here, the Apollo, which is basically the ELU version of the Apollo rocket. As you see here, it has more F5 engines, 7 to be exact, and it is completely full with fuel. So, not completely, there you go. So we had some reduction in fuel capacity here, and also the lander module and the service module, of course. Okay, let's get back to the EVE mission. There we go, we have our Apollo 11, that's how I called it. So let's launch this, let's look at this. This here is my EVE variant of the Apollo 11, or the Saturn V rocket rather. You may have noticed the lunar module is missing, because we have no need for it. Let's get rid of that shroud. In here we have a lot of fuel tanks, so we have enough delta V for that service module to go anywhere meaningful. And of course, we have some more engines in here. And we have a lot more fuel in here and some vector engines down there. So basically the idea was to pack as much of a punch as I could into this. Kerbal engineer tells us this has an entirety of almost 9,000 meters per second. And for EVE, there we go, we have enough thrust to weight ratio to get this off of the surface, even if we apply atmospheric levels. So if we raise this, you can see that each stage at their planned altitude, basically, should be capable to carry us into out of the atmosphere. So we have thrust to weight ratios of more than 1 as soon as we get higher than 16,000 meters. Of course, not the final stage, the service module, because that was intended to be in orbit, but even if we're still in the atmosphere of EVE, like 30 kilometers height, then we still would have a thrust to weight ratio larger than 1. So this was my plan, and as you have seen already, it has worked, but yeah, this was only just part of the equation. So, where do we have the lander? There we go. Or should we take the empty one? No, let's take the lander. Takes a bit of loading. Okay. This is the mod hangar extender, which basically reduces the VAB to just nothing. Okay, let's get rid of that huge fairing. Goodbye. Okay, this here is now girded. These girders are here for the parachutes. Parachute speed should always be higher than the center of mass. I mean, the center of mass is really low here, but still I wanted this to be quite high up so it would be stable as possible. And also for these separator boosters to really be able to get these girders clear of the main structure. Okay, fuel converter is down here, and solar panels, and fuel cells, and of course drills. And I've hidden Where is it? Ah, it's not in this build, it's in the stack build. I've hidden the resource ore canister, which is just one of those tiny tanks here. I've hidden it right in the middle, so it would be in the center of mass, and I only needed to transfer to actually be able to get ore out of the surface, and then it's also already processed. And yeah, this thing here, this entire assembly, it was designed to as a descent stage, so these vector engines would fire in a retrograde orbit, in the retrograde direction, and get this thing down into the atmosphere. Then of course the heat shields would engage, and you have seen the result. This weighs a measly 360 tons. Let's see how that changes if we get the fuel out. Yes, still 320 tons, but yeah, you get the picture. And then this would be decoupled, of course, and get steered clear of the rocket. I'm using the girder modules to act as sort of a landing gear, because they're quite stable, and those puny little landing legs, they wouldn't have a chance on Eve to carry that massive rocket. So, and then of course I had to build a booster for it. Okay, the first thing of course I did was build that third stage, which mainly consisted only of a 5-meter fuel tank with a few of those J10 engines. And the Wolfhounds. And then of course the second stage. This was a bit more trickier because I wanted this to have enough punch to get me quite away from Kerbin. And also, there is not really a nice sort of transition between the 5-meter parts and sort of smaller parts. So yeah, I had to do these slanted modules on the 5-meter to 3.75 meter tanks, and they never look really perfect, but it's better than with something in between. Solid rocket boosters, of course, to get this stage separated from the rest of the vehicle. And then just some tail pieces to top this off and increase aerodynamic efficiency when launching from Kerbin. Okay, just lining everything up so it is not touching the tank, which could cause problems on separation. And also adding some tiny rocket boosters, well, Saptrons rather, that hide in between the parts, but do not stick out too far, and then we'll push those away. Okay, propulsion for the second stage. I also wanted to use the Wolfhounds due to their excellent efficiency, but yeah, they prove to be not as attachment-friendly as, for instance, the Vectors. And also when I was finished with that, which you can see in just a bit, I'm using 6-way symmetry, and then adding all of that in the middle. There we go. Yeah, now we're using thrust plate because I want to have a clean separation of the stack. And once I did that and consulted Kerbal Engineer, I realized that we would not have enough thrust-to-weight ratio to get away from Kerbin. So yeah, I had to do a bit of a redesign of the second stage. And as well, in many cases, to be honest, I reverted to the Vector engine, because it still really is one of the best engines, if not the best engine in Kerbal Space Program. Okay, centerpiece, once again with the thrust plate, or thrust plate separator, not sure how you want to call those. But basically what I want to do, I want to have just one separation point between stages, so that the separated stages stay in one piece and don't scatter all over the place. Also, it makes for nicer visuals. Okay, this looks good in regards to thrust-to-weight ratio and delta V. And then it was time to build the big one, the first stage, the huge first stage that will propel this thing into the atmosphere, rather out of the atmosphere. I start with the center stack, as you can see here, And once I've done that, I will move to the other parts. Of course, we will need more fuel than in the second stage, because this needs to propel quite a lot of mass into orbit. So I'm trying to do like 3 S4, so 5-meter tanks, and then to top this off, I'm gonna add the vectors down there. Okay, I'm packing these really tightly, so we could possibly have enough fuel in there. We have enough thrust on that stage. So yeah, that's really overkilling all of these engines down there. But now the bit of a tricky part comes, because this is something that I really like to do because it makes for great stage separations, but it's not so easy. Basically what you need to do is you do that symmetry thing where you add the tanks to the center column. And then what I do is I add fairings on top of those, and I attach those to the other stage. So the idea is that once the separation occurs, it only occurs on the center stage, but the fairings make it appear as everything is packed tight and the engines don't stick out anywhere. In this case, I had to move the tanks a little bit so that they would fit correctly. As you can see, now they do. And now we have a beautiful clean stack of boosters. Alright, so this does not look completely right yet, because if you remember, the real Saturn V has sort of an ending that's a bit wider, of course, to make space for those huge F5 engines. F1 engines, 5 F1 engines. And here I was trying to position the rocket in such a way that is not too high up off the ground and still sort of in the center circle of the launch pad. Okay, some more vectors, and now attaching this again in 6-way symmetry, but sort of in the middle of things, so that these are kind of tapering out at the end of the rocket to make for a bit more of a nice visual. Okay, I'm just grabbing those that assembly I did for the tips, and I remove those and add those again. Of course, take away those tiny solid rocket boosters because I don't need them. And there we go! So basically, that's how I built my Saturn V delivery system, which delivered the Saturn V rocket to Eve. And yeah, I hope maybe this was helpful for you if you want to do something similar or something even more crazy than this. And as always, I hope you enjoyed what you watched. If you did, please consider subscribing if you don't already have. Also, please put a like on that video and hit that subscription bell. And as always, thanks for watching. Goodbye.